Even though our visit to Salem, Massachusetts was rather disappointing because of how much of a tourist trap it's become, we want to share with you the saving grace that we did at the end of our day there.
Which was a haunted walking tour. Hi, I'm Adam.
And I'm Phoebe.
And we're the couple from In the Great Wide. We visited Salem during our month-long Amtrak USA Rail Pass adventure, going coast to coast via train.
Salem is widely considered to be in the top 10 most haunted cities in the United States.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's fantastic when it's not October and it's not Halloween time, but we were highly disappointed by the time that we spent in Salem because it has just become so commercialized. It was really disappointing. There were highlights definitely for the day, but for the most part during the day, it was just kind of like, all right.
Yeah. There are tons of walking tours available, which I did not realize until we got there. And like every other shop that you walk by down Essex Street, which is the main street there, it's like walking tour and come do this tour and come do this tour.
So many.
So we actually pre-booked one that I found online, which I will link in the description so that you can go and book the exact same tour that we did so you don't get confused.
Highly recommend to pre-book during the month of October because they do fill up very quickly as the city is very popular during Halloween. I mean, we must have seen like 10 tours leaving at the same time, and they were all had like 30 people. So I mean, it was a lot. So definitely pre-book because the Salem Ghost Night Tour is totally worth it.
Yeah.
Totally 100% worth it.
But we don't usually do guided walking tours, just like a little disclaimer, because we do so much of our own research before we go, and paying for a guided tour usually feels unnecessary, or we have local friends who live in the area to show us around, so we rarely pay for walking tours.
Yeah.
But this one was great. I'm really glad that we decided to book this one. Our tour guide, Elena, was super knowledgeable and
awesome.
Very entertaining.
She was great. She was absolutely fantastic. Was totally chill, down to earth about everything that happens in Salem, all the stuff that has happened in the last 300 plus years. But she was great. Even talking about the fact that like the tests she has to take before you're even able to get in to do a guide, to be a guide. You have to take all these tests set forth by Salem. But she knew the answers to everything. It was great.
Yeah, we had the opportunity, along with the rest of our group, to ask her questions, whatever we wanted, and she always knew the answer to everyone's questions, so it was really impressive.
It was really, really cool. She told us about the multiple tests she had to go through before she could lead a tour, which obviously leads into the fact that Salem is very regulated with how it presents information to the public, but this leads to some very knowledgeable guides that give very specific information.
Such as the hauntings at the Pickman House, which is essentially inside the old Burying Point Cemetery, which we did a video on last week. I will link to it right now.
It was great. Apparently, the top floor, you would see kids popping out or faces in the windows because when people back in the day in the 1600s in the area, when there was diseases, they would just throw them in the attic and then just kind of wait to see if they died or not.
Yeah, they had to isolate the illnesses, the viruses, because they had no way of treating them.
There was nothing else to do, and everything was so highly contagious, and if somebody got sick, you sequestered them because otherwise the entire village, the entire settlement might get sick. And
but supposedly this happened to a child at the Pickman House.
Yeah.
He was sequestered in the attic and ended up passing away up there. So now there are stories of seeing a child's face in the window of the upper story of the Pickman House.
There is a tree at the Charter Street Cemetery, the old burying point, that was being constantly hit by lightning, and they thought it was because it was haunted.
They thought it was an angry spirit.
It was angry. It was, whoever, it was probably John Hawthorne, because he was kind of a dick. But anyway, they thought it was a spirit that was angry, so lightning hit it like 27 times or something over the course of like 10 years. And then they discovered that in the middle of the tree, in the trunk, was an iron rod that was in the ground, and it was attracting the lightning.
Yeah. So this tree had just grown around this iron rod, which is crazy.
Yeah. It happens.
But,
trees, you don't stop trees from growing, man.
Oh,
when
I
they want
know.
to grow, they'll just absorb everything around them.
It's just strange that it got to a point where people thought that this cemetery was haunted because of that. Like, nobody thought that... Like, nobody knew that there was an iron rod in there? I don't know. Because trees don't grow that fast, guys.
No. It obviously took a long time to grow over that rod, but it was probably put in very early when the first settlement was first put there. But
it was an interesting story, anyway.
Yeah.
And then we went past City Hall, where Elena, our tour guide, told us about the city under the city.
So weird. There was, because, of course, they were Puritans, they were very strict about stuff you can do.
Can't do.
Well, can't do. Yeah, can and can't do. But they would just created the city underneath Salem. And that's where they had the prostitutes and the gambling and the drinking. The seedy underbelly, literally, of the city.
And as far as I understand, the tunnels and stuff are still there.
Yeah.
You don't have access to them.
No.
But it was so interesting that I had never heard about that before. Seattle has a similar system, which you can go take tours of.
Yeah.
Which we are 100% doing the next time we go to Seattle.
Yeah, that looks so cool. There's a seafood restaurant called Turner's that is apparently haunted by Bridget Bishop. She was one of them that was, I believe she was hanged.
She was hanged.
She was accused of being a witch and then was hanged. One of the first ones, I believe, to be hanged. But apparently at Turner Seafood, she steals silverware. Like, you can be sitting and eating, and if you look away, you look back and your fork is gone or your spoon is gone. They literally have giant piles of silverware around the restaurant because apparently this happens all the time.
And the staff knows about it.
Yeah.
So they just kind of like laugh it off and they'll bring you more silverware.
Yeah, and they've supposedly seen Bridget Bishop like coming down the stairs and like she's been around, and yeah, the staff has been there long enough that they're just kind of like, all right, she's here, like whatever.
Yeah. And then what I think was probably the most interesting to me was Elena, our tour guide, took us to a parking lot across the street from a large building that was built where the old prison was. So this was the prison where people that were accused of being witches were held during the Salem witch trials. And they were held there for a long time. Several people died in this prison because of the awful conditions. And people were also often tortured in this prison in order to try to get them to confess to being a witch. So there's a big building there now that's not the prison anymore.
No, it's like a big office building, kind of. She told us about how there was a phone company that was there, and they would get random phone calls of people just screaming. Companies would come and go in this building a lot.
Yeah. Not prank phone calls.
No.
But just like the phone would randomly ring.
Well, that's when, because it was a phone company, they would know that the other end, there was nobody on the other end. It wasn't connected to anything. So it was spooky.
Yeah. So that it was just crazy.
It was
to hear
a
these
lot
stories.
Going on. Yeah.
And then she also pointed down the street to where Giles Corey, another victim from the Salem witch trials, was pressed to death. Because that was not done at the gallows.
No.
As is portrayed in most TV shows and movies about the Salem witch trials. He was just like dragged out of the prison and left for like 2 days.
Yeah, it was
finally died.
just over 2 days. They just kept adding weight over the days to get him to confess to the fact that he was a witch. And he refused to. He eventually died from being pressed to death. Now there's a parking lot over it, so, you know.
It is right next to Howard Street Cemetery, though, which, according to our tour guide, is far more haunted than the old burying point, which is supposedly the most haunted place in Massachusetts.
Yeah. She took us by the Gardner-Pingree House, where a crime took place in 1830 that supposedly inspired the board game Clue, although doing more research on it, the game is from England, and Parker Brothers just made this up to help sell the game. When they bought it from the English company, the guy who created it during the air blitzes in World War II. In the 40s.
So it was a publicity thing?
It was totally a publicity thing. There was a murder there, and it was similar in nature to, like, Clue, someone dying, and they couldn't figure out who it was, and apparently Daniel Webster actually was one of the attorneys during this trial, which I thought was really fascinating. But, you know, much like the most of Salem, it's just something that's I wouldn't say made up, but it's definitely...
It's presented a specific way.
Yeah, it was like kind of fluffed up a bit to get people to be more excited about things.
Yeah, but it was a cool house, and it was interesting. She told us about the murder, the crime that was committed at this house, which you said was a real thing.
Yeah,
after doing more research, it just doesn't have anything to do with Clue.
Captain James White, I think. It was White. I don't remember his first name, but it was in 1830, and he had a lot of money and. They couldn't figure out how he got killed. Someone actually had a ladder, and they went up to his house and everything. But the house itself is now owned by the Peabody Essex Museum, and you can actually take tours of it during the day. And it's a very well-maintained house from, like, the early 1800s.
Yeah. That is one thing that I would like to do.
Yeah.
If and when we go back to Salem.
Yeah.
But we highly recommend this Salem Ghost Night Tour, because it really saved our otherwise dreary... day. And it was highly entertaining and educational, which is what we're all about.
Yeah, we love that history. We release new videos every Tuesday and Thursday, plus blog posts with even more information on the website to help you plan your own trip. So make sure you're subscribed here on YouTube and are signed up for our newsletter on our website.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the Great Wide somewhere.